The 2024 World Chess Championship continues between Gukesh and Ding. We are now in game 13. We just saw the conclusion of it. So without further ado, let's get right into what just happened. Now, there's only 2 games remaining in this honestly very exciting and intriguing match. People have had their opinions about the match before it started, but maybe you'll be joining me and saying, you know what, my opinion has shifted a little bit. This has been rather exciting to follow. We've had wins on both sides. It's felt like a very competitive match. And Gukesh has his final say with the white pieces here because Ding will get the white pieces tomorrow. And there's only 2 games remaining. So quite an important game for Gukesh here. Let's see how he starts the game off because that has been rather unpredictable. And it is the move E4. So E4, we have seen almost every move tried. C4, knight f3, d4, e4 in this match, which has made it particularly intriguing for myself and maybe many viewers out there. And how will Ding reply? Honestly, going right back to the game 1, the French, we basically didn't see much e4 after that from Gukesh. So you kind of had this feeling that either Gukesh was preparing it to bring out later in the match, or he was just not playing against Ding's French. And to be honest with you, that's kind of ludicrous. There's no way that the French deserves that kind of reputation, but very impressive from Ding and his team to even put that out into the world, because the French is not a top tier opening, but he's playing it like it is. So that's really exciting just to see openings like that brought out at the highest level again. So far we are repeating what happened in game number 1, knight c3, knight f6, Ding opting not to go for the bishop b4, win hour type of stuff. Instead, just e5, knight d7, and I believe in game 1 we saw f4. This knight did retreat to e2. We saw c3, knight f3, something kind of like that. In this case, we just saw the immediate knight e2 from Gukesh. I'm sure that Gukesh has absolutely spent a lot of time, his team, no doubt, countless hours, saying we're not going to go down to the French again, and we're certainly going to come very well prepared today. So I expect most of what we see from Gukesh in the opening phase here to be something that he's definitely looked at and feels very confident to play, because this is such a critical game in the World Championship match. His final shot to dictate things with the white pieces. c5. Now, if we did see something like c3, f4, knight f3, I think we would still transpose back into the game. We see a3 from Gukesh. For example, if Ding played a5 here and we played f4, we may have transposed exactly to game number 1. But of course, Ding can only assume that his opponent is very well prepared, not only in the French in general to bring it out again, or to play against it again, feel confident. But certainly the number 1 line you're going to review is the one that actually happened in game number 1. So bishop e7 from Ding, keeping it solid here, but after bishop e3 from Gukesh, the one move that he's basically not included is the move f4. And maybe he's just doing without it. Something like knight f3, knight f4, bishop e2 castle looks like a pretty simple way to play. Now we see the move knight b6 from Ding. Now, knight b6, I draw attention to, first of all, as expected in this game, especially because Gukesh is playing against the French willingly. We know he's super well prepared, but it's also been his best phase of the game. Ding has been down on time in every single game in the opening. This is no exception. He's already down a little bit of time, but after the move knight b6, he has an hour remaining against 2 hours for Gukesh. But, time pressure in the opening and Ding Liren, name a more iconic duo. It's just is what we come to expect from this match. So really nothing to see here. Definitely you could say it's good preparation because it's already had its intended effect. Knight f4 from Gukesh. The knight goes to b6 to go to the c4 square. And with the knight on e2, knight c4 is particularly effective. Now, you might be looking at the b3, and I certainly was as well. b3 looks reasonable to just kind of control that knight, but it's not the ideal move to play when you look at white's position. You kind of like that pawn structure, how everything defends everything there. And if this gets taken, something like this, at some point black will play a5, a4, and a5 will either get white to play a4, and then the b4 square becomes available, or a4 will get played, white will play b4, and then maybe the c4 square becomes available. So it's quite difficult to refuse entry to keep every single square protected. It's very difficult to do. And instead he's continuing with his plan of knight f4 instead of getting bogged down trying to handle knight b6 with the move b3. But knight f4 also came relatively quickly, and after a near 40-minute think from Ding to respond in a couple of minutes with knight f4, to me shows clear preparation and that he's very comfortable with the ensuing position. Takes, pawn takes back, of course, and now knight c4, it just feels like a move you need to play. What is black doing? This bishop in the French is always an issue, and it continues to look like one right here. There's no b6 to even get developed. Bishop d7, rook c8, queen c7 is just not good enough in the opening. White's pieces, the quality of White's pieces will be so high, especially in comparison to Ding's. So at this point, Ding is kind of committed to the move knight c4. It's the only one that makes sense. Gukesh, on the other hand, takes relatively quickly. Bishop c1 is a move, but I don't think it really lines up with the way that he's played. If you really didn't want to play bishop takes c4, I think maybe going for the move b3 was possible, that we just looked at. It wasn't a terrible attempt, but after allowing the knight there, I think bishop takes does make sense. It's coming from the original square, so it's not like you've played bishop e2 and then you're wasting time again with bishop takes on c4. Makes sense to go all the way in one motion and then just get the knight out, castle, and go from there. You'll have a lead in development clearly, but you'll have given up the bishop pair. So a bit of a dynamic struggle incoming. So that's what Gukesh decides to do. He takes, Ding of course recaptures. He does choose the move knight e2, for example, instead of knight f3, but most importantly, instead of the other option, which was queen g4. Very risky option, and to me, entirely understandable why this wasn't chosen. Now, if black reacts with g6, then we start to be like, well, okay, well, wait a minute, this just makes sense. I would trade queen g4 for g6. Some weak dark squares here, h4, h5. This makes sense. But the move queen g4, to me, when I was looking at it and analyzing after, I was like, wait, there's also some really tricky lines here. Queen a5 check. I mean, moving the king does not look appealing. So bishop d2, queen b6, and we're going for queen g7, surely. But after rook f8, look at the position, right? d4 and b2 are both hanging. Yes, you can defend them with bishop c3 to watch both, but look, after knight d4, I don't know that we're so happy here, right? The knights do not look like they do a good job. Black's playing bishop d7 castling. There's crazy threats in this position already. Not a position that I would trust, and certainly at this point, you're out of your preparation. Does not look like something you want to go into. Gukesh might have considered it, but really he played knight e2, knight ge2 very, very quickly. Doesn't surprise me. He's clearly prepared here, and he's evaluated, maybe correctly, that queen g4, queen a5 is just way too risky. Even though the engine might support it, I certainly agree with his decision to keep it more calm with knight ge2 and just play the middle game. The opening in the middle game has been a very successful phase of the game in the entire match for Gukesh. This is something I've repeated in almost every recap. So he's probably looking to just lean into that. He's had good opening preparation so far. It's not like Ding is in a world of trouble, but White is definitely slightly better here. b5 to connect the pawns, absolutely. Castles, castles, everybody needs to get to safety. Knight c3, the only understandable reason to put the knight on e2 is to then bring it to c3. Yes, it could help out here, but I was also thinking, the move d5 becomes quite likely. So this pawn needs support, and we see rook b8. Why not a6? To be honest, slightly difficult to understand, but really the move a6 doesn't help. What would black like to do in the future? The move a6 is it's a stutter step for the a5 that you want to play. You want to play rook b8, a5, b4. Get the pawns going. So if you waste time by playing like a6, well then what's going to happen later when you need a plan? You're going to go rook b8 and a5 and b4, right? So he's trying to say, look, I'll play the move that I need to play regardless, And if this pawn gets attacked again, sure, I might have to play a6. But if not, I'm ready to play a5. So this is the more flexible move, and a6 is just a little bit more passive. Not terrible, but not the best. So I believe that rook b8 makes a lot of sense for the eventual a5 b4. Knight h5 played. This is a very good move. It's also something to just keep in mind. This structure right here, when you get that advanced pawn, really in any type of position against this, and there's no knight on f6, a knight on h5 can be really, really annoying because g6 is never a move that makes a lot of sense. You know, the knight can hop into the f6 square, often even at the cost of a pawn, just because you get that bishop, and the king is so weak afterwards. But you can also just return, and then the squares are weak anyway. Plus, in this position, queen g4 is coming with basically the exact same threats. So it's quite uncomfortable. Not a lot of pieces for black can actually make it over to the king side, you know? Like, there's not a lot of frontal defense here for black. Basically just a castled king and his pawns against white's incoming attack here. Bishop h6, queen g4, quite scary. So that pretty much causes the move f5 to be played. And this is a top move, absolutely. A very key move. No doubt one that Ding in his preparation with his team has looked at, maybe not in this exact position, but just as a concept that at some point this move might need to be played. Now, the opening of the position is not that consequential for Ding because he's got the two bishops. And long term, he's got this fantastic diagonal that he can aspire to, right? That bishop has a long-term destination. So f5 is probably a move that, while it looks, you know, kind of impressive and definitely a move you need to be sure of before you play, I think that it was for him, but it's almost necessary. It is the best move, but I think without it, you're kind of in trouble with queen g4 looming. So certainly the pawn gets taken. En passant, bishop takes on f6, queen f3. So hitting the knight, and yes, looks a little bit scary here, but the threat on the knight is most important. But queen f3, honestly, queen e8 is a very nice move. So queen f3 played, and queen e8 was a very quick response from Ding. It makes a lot of sense. It guards the knight. It also happens to pressure here. Clearly, there's a threat now that black can uncover with bishop takes d4, for example. So the bishop needs to be taken. Rook takes on f6, queen e2. Now, it might not look like there's much in this position, but I have to say, Ding has been struggling very well here. The advantage was probably a little bit higher earlier. I think he's done a great job to get this position. That being said, Gukesh's advantage here might not be incredible. It might not be massive, but I actually really like his position. There is clear pressure to be put on this e-pawn, and black's plan not only is very slow over here, like it takes some moves to make that happen, but the knight just has easy squares to jump to when attacked. Plus the c-pawn would be loose. So it just feels like white has very easy moves to make. Black's not even completed development, and the rooks are a little bit clumsy. Like, they're not that coordinated. White just has the more standard, simple position, rooks to the middle of the board. So opposite bishops as well is another reason why in an endgame, yeah, it might be more drawn, but in a middle game, talk about this concept a lot. In a middle game, if there's opposite bishops, it'll actually benefit the side that's attacking, because let's say I start making threats and dictating the pace with white. If I'm making threats on the dark squares, the bishop just can't participate. So it really kind of depends who's dictating the pace. And I think that it would definitely be Gukesh here. Looks like some easy moves to make. Move that bishop, d5. I can definitely see how white's position looks easy to play. Queen g6. Okay, f3. He's anticipating the bishop ending up on that diagonal. Another very nice move by Gukesh. One thing to point out here is, once again, time has leveled. Ding and Gukesh, as we reach the late stage of the middle game, it started to even up, which is a very, very common trend in this match. But I really like the move f3. It kind of deals with the f-file and deals with this diagonal all at once. So big fan of that. Rook d1, just nice simple moves. Ding played rook f8 just to bring the rook back, try to coordinate. The rook is like not useful on f6. You're not rook lifting, you're not checkmating. So this is what I was saying about the coordination being a little off. We see knight e7, very logical to go to either d5 or f5 here. But now, you know, maybe one of the more impressive moves Not an outrageous move, but certainly a nice one. Bishop to f4 from Gukesh, and we can just see that, you know, knight e7 took a lot of time for Ding to play. He's probably not fully satisfied here, and a very quick move from Gukesh. Bishop f4. He was probably ready for the move knight e7 with this reply. What the heck does it even do? Rook takes f4. Well, we have a very nice tactic here, and honestly one of the most satisfying tactics, because this tactic only works if your opponent has a lack of coordination. The queen is hitting both rooks, but the thing about rooks is the way they move, they can always protect one another. So the only reason that would not be the case is with other things in the way. Meaning, you know, rook b4, if either rook could play that, would guard, there would be no fork because the rooks would protect each other. Same thing with rook f8. But neither one of those moves is actually playable here because the bishop's in the way this way and there's many pawns in the way here. So it's just a unique fork of the two rooks, and there's no way to defend both of them. And so obviously Ding is not capturing the bishop on f4, but I thought that was a kind of a nice tactic right there. And really, it's not that, wow, this tactic is so impressive, you know, it's going to win the game, but we get to improve the bishop with white from e3 to f4 and then into some important squares here just like that. So I think it's actually a pretty significant upgrade. Bishop to c7. Now you could play rook c6 here, and this may well be the move that should be played, but you know, a lot goes into a move like this. First of all, you have to be sure about the b5 pawn. Definitely, you know, I wouldn't say this is the move you expect, but it is playable. Knight takes b5, definitely what Ding was bothered by here. So he wanted to keep the b pawn protected. It does look a little suspicious here with a6 and bishop a6 both playable, and we've got quite a few pieces hanging. So for example, a6, but white does have one single move that keeps things under control here, and it is the move bishop d6. So seeing that, Ding probably said, no, there's no way I'm hanging a pawn here for no reason. I'm playing rook b7, but now white gets exactly what he wants with bishop d6. This is the dream. It's not about winning the knight or anything like that, but after rook e8, you simply take, and the resulting position is a bishop, which, by the way, still has not moved. Against a knight, it looks like really easy gameplay for white. The rooks are kind of coordinated on the 7th rank, very unusual and non-standard here. And the knight just looks phenomenal. Maybe get it to c5, maybe on e5. It's great on c3 right now. So I don't know that this is a specific advantage that's going to lead to a win, but it looks like a very comfortable position. And I think there's been some clear outplaying going on from Gukesh in the last 5 to 10 moves. The bishop, that was a really nice maneuver there. And while Ding has not really made any clear mistakes, he's definitely worse here. He's slightly worse. You know, he's down a little bit more on time now. And I like where Gukesh has taken this middle game. So give a lot of credit to Gukesh for these maneuvers here. Queen e5. He's on the hunt for a win with only 2 games remaining. He knows the final chance with the white pieces is very significant. Queen e5, a6, guarding b5. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. d5. So he goes actually right away with d5. And I'm actually torn with this move. I don't know whether I support it or not. Because on the one hand, you know, white could sit here and just make a lot of like kind of slow, nice moves. But if you do that, it feels like black's going to catch up. There's going to be a lot of useful moves played by black. Rook d7, bishop b7. So instead, he's trying to strike immediately with d5. Yes, you could say the d pawn is a weak, isolated pawn, but so is the e pawn. So you're kind of trading off 2 weaknesses. You are activating some pieces here, getting some more open lines. Especially black's king looks honestly like it's in a lot of danger with the 8th rank available, right? Rook d8 maybe in the future. But it's amazing. Ding just so resilient, finds some coordination here. I don't know how he's even doing it. This bishop still has not moved. d5 takes, queen takes d5. So both weaknesses are gone. Queen e6, guarding the bishop, by the way. Now the threat is rook d8, or at least it's a decent move, along with rook e1. The reason I mentioned rook e1 is because, I mean, let's just say some move like this. I'm just going to play this for now. This type of position would be very, very intriguing. It's 2 rooks for the queen, But the knight and the bishop plus the imbalanced pawn structure and the slightly open black king makes it, I would definitely prefer white here, but it makes it a very, very interesting position. Not sure 100% what's happening there, but Gukesh, I'm assuming, would be interested in that sort of imbalance if he's trying to still play for a win, which I get the feeling that he always is. So that's just a thought. Rook e8 played, covering rook d8, rook e1, and of course, backing up that claim. And I should have just probably used the moves from the game rather than show you that idea with h6, because look at this. Simply, queen takes e1 could have been played, and it was not. So that just goes to show the queen against the two rooks. Happy to take that imbalance is Gukesh, and Ding realizes, no, that's not a position that I would like to be in. Knight e4. How can you say no to this move? Knight d6 seems to be threatening an unstoppable fork, but there is going to be a trade happening on e1. How does he get out of it? The move rook to f8. Now this move is maybe what caught Gukesh off guard. Knight e4 looks like a move where not a single piece can stop the invasion of knight to d6. And crucially, there's even a nice move here. Well, a poor move from black, but a really nice response. So let's say the move that could be played here is rook to c7. So if you'd like, have a look here, see what move white can play. But there's really one super nice move that you can play in response. I'll let you guys try to figure it out for a sec. Yes, that move is knight f6 check. Beautiful move here. And if the pawn takes, we take on e8. The queen takes, drops the rook, and if the king moves, well, white's already out material, so all we have to do is just go somewhere to save the rook. And if the queen takes, that's just hanging absolutely everything, honestly. So really, Gukesh played a move here where it was do or die, because if Ding does not find the only move in the position, rook f8, a beautiful move, by the way, he used half his time remaining to find it. If he doesn't find it, he's lost. Every single move is completely lost here. Knight d6 looks unstoppable, but for Gukesh, slightly unfortunate because he played a move that was so strong that it forced the opponent to play the best move. It's like you either play the best move or you're dead lost. So a guy of Ding's caliber is going to sit there and find it. Absolutely. And he does. Now, knight d6 was played, and you'll see the response here, rook c7. This is how he gets out of everything, right? Using the tempo on the queen, and suddenly 3 pieces that were vulnerable to knight d6 are all going to get moved out of the way. It's amazing, really. And keep in mind, we are on, what are we right now? Move 33. The bishop is still on the starting square. It's amazing. So I mean, Gukesh has really, for me, he's laid on the pressure. Opening preparation, went up against the French again, probably expected that, playing e4. Came up with a new variation. Great start to the middle game, huge lead on the clock. Transition to probably not the biggest advantage. Ding navigated the middle game pretty well this time, but still great tactic there in the late middle game to bring the bishop in, trade, and then as a result has knight against bishop. Seems to have so many threats, but Ding like just stays in it. It's unbelievable to me. He's such a fighter, and he's just so resilient with his defense. Queen d5, king h8. I'm sitting here looking at knight e8, and I'm like, well, this should work now as well, surely. We had knight e4 that Ding is just dodging. Knight e8 looks like it should be working. No, queen b6 check. Ding has another resource prepared, and it's actually white that would be, can you believe it, slightly worse in this position after rook d7. The bishop is kind of like the quarterback, just making things happen from the c8 square without even moving. Such a weird game in terms of coordination, but Ding is finding it, and it must have been so frustrating for Gukesh to play this one. Rook e5 played. He's trying to double up the rooks here, of course. We do see the move rook e7. At this point, I mean, Ding is looking to trade something off and get this bishop developed finally. I was not sure if we would see maybe like an h6 move. That looked pretty normal. Bishop b7 strangely can be played because this rook is under attack, but I thought h6 made a lot of sense here, knowing that knight e8 doesn't work. Okay, rook e7. Clearly, he wants a trade first and then h6. So this is the position we get. And now, I'm not saying that white's all of a sudden worse or anything, but black is very much out of the weeds, so to speak. And after like queen f4, suddenly white's king is not safe at all. Queen c5, operating on dark squares, which is just a great principle when you're against a light squared bishop. Everything is much safer there. Bishop d7, and we can all give a round of applause to Ding Liren, the current world champion, who on move 38 completed his development. So I thought that was a bit of a funny touch there, but obviously Ding has played just a phenomenal defensive and resourceful game right here, because it looked like he was lost tactically so many times. I don't know how he did it. Like I said, must be a frustrating game for Gukesh to play. The rook comes into e7. As I mentioned, queen f4 was going to happen. Now I wouldn't say the wheels are coming off here for Gukesh, but definitely the advantage, I could say he's sure that it's disappeared. There's no way that there's an advantage here for Gukesh anymore, nothing significant at least. Queen d4 does hit the g7 pawn, threatening checkmate. Rook g8, a very passive move, but Ding also knows he's finally going to exchange that amazing knight for the questionably bad bishop. It's not terrible anymore, but man, that bishop was doing nothing the entire game. Be nice to trade it off. Plus queen c1 is there. So you have a lot of activity with these remaining pieces. And although Gukesh manages to create a nice safe place for his king, great centralization, the rook is very passive, still the material is even, and obviously the players have also hit time control, so that's not an issue anymore. c3, probably the last really phenomenal move from Ding in terms of defensive execution. Pawn takes, but if the queen had taken instead, what would we have seen? Queen takes, pawn takes, rook c8, hitting the pawn. What happens now if you defend? The rook comes to c4, the rook goes to a4. You can't defend this pawn because your rook is stuck here. So there's no answer to this. Yes, you could play this and be up a pawn here, but black is just going to play b4, and that's about it, right? The pawns are going to trade. We're going to have this 3-on-2 position. For players of this caliber, that is, pretty much the exact same thing as a dead draw or a draw offer. While you're up a pawn there, it's well known that position is not one you can make progress in. So despite being down a pawn here, Ding recognizes that c3 could lead to a position which is just a forced draw. So Gukesh, always the fighter, decides to take with the b pawn and play a few more moves. Understandable. He's got the key, slightly better position maybe, but with black having the extra pawn here, while white maybe can win this pawn, the result is going to be the same, which is a 3-on-2. So it's hard for me to realistically say that Gukesh is going to achieve more than just a 3-on-2 rook endgame here. a5 was played, queen c4. If it's taken, I would say that the result is probably something very similar to what we've looked at. The maximum white can do is win both pawns in exchange for his own c-pawn. So decides to keep the queens on the board, but queen takes c5, queen takes b5, excuse me, played after queen c6 because he realized, there's just nothing to do really. You can play rook takes b5 here, but I think at this point rook c8 or a4 will be played, and once again the future seems like it's going to be this pawn for this pawn, and white's going to have a 3-on-2. It's a decent achievement for Gukesh, but as I keep mentioning, for these guys, it's just not, it's not a real winning chance. So after some exchanges here, Ding is willingly losing this b pawn, and we have a rook endgame, which I'll honestly just breeze through the moves. I would talk more about this if it was a position where there was a real attempt to win. Of course, Gukesh is playing on here. He's trying to win. It's not that he's not trying to win, but there's nothing to do in this endgame. And we see Ding with actually just a very accurate move here, h5, because the king takes, allows rook g3, and that means that we get the draw almost immediately due to king g5, rook g4, and as anticipated, Ding did not even need that many moves in the 3-on-2 endgame to show immediately that, hey, this is a dead draw. But I understand Gukesh playing on. He's got the extra pawn, may as well play a few moves. It's clearly his last chance with the white pieces in this match, at least before the tie breaks. So, he wants to play a few more moves at least. So this amazingly entertaining game ends in a draw. That's how game 13 ends. I think the person that can be obviously more satisfied here is certainly Ding Liren. He had a real tough position. Really impressed by the defense shown this game. And going into the final round of the classical portion, Ding will have the white pieces. So he set himself up in the final round to potentially win out, you know, and just call game, call match, just like that. However, he also has the flexibility if he favors himself in the rapid, which himself probably and a lot of people do, then you have the power to just steer the game in a drawn direction. At this level, if Ding wants to draw in the next round, guess what? He's got it. That's kind of how it works with the white pieces. If you want to play not too ambitious, not too risky, I think he's got that. So very interesting to see what the strategy will be. If we see a kind of boring game in the final round, then I think that means that Ding is liking his chances in the rapid, something for him and his team to think about and discuss, obviously. But there have been advantages for both sides to claim throughout this entire match, and I would not rule out a game that starts kind of modest, but you know, maybe it's even Gukesh who wants to spice things up in that last game. We'll see. There's going to be a lot of nerves at play. Ding has been here before, but Gukesh has not. So it kind of sets us up for a very exciting game 14, which will be tomorrow. For this one, I have nothing more to say than what looked like great preparation from Gukesh. Really nice middle game. He seized a small but meaningful advantage using tactics, but it was just not up to Ding's defense here, which I can't say enough good things about. He had the bishop on c8 the entire game. He only completed development on move 38. There were so many times where I was like, no, surely this tactic Gukesh is going to win with. This one will be enough. But Ding just stays resilient. He's down an hour early on, but this is just what we come to know from this match. So the game ends in a draw. It's still tied, but the all-important game 14, the final classical game, will happen tomorrow. Of course, we got the recap for you tomorrow, so I'll see you guys for that one. But remember, we do have tie breaks as well if that game tomorrow ends in a draw. So it all comes down to Ding Liren with the white pieces. What will happen in game 14? I will see you guys for the recap then.